Welcome to another Kingscrusher radio show. So this is on the playchess.com server around 9:10, just off the Holby City. Let me just see the preview. So this week we're going to be carrying on actually from last week, looking at another three fantastic games of Garry Kasparov, arguably one of the greatest players of all time. Many people believe that. I'll just say hi all on stream. Okay. This first game I'd like to show is against one of the great women's world champions, Maya Shibundanzi. Let me see if I can get some pronunciation help on that from chessgames.com.
Maya Chiburdanice.
That's much better than my one.
Maya Chiburdanice.
Maya Shibundanzi.
Maya Chiburdanice.
She's still around, 55 years old. Born in Georgia. She was awarded the WIM title in 1974 and the WGM title in 1977. She was also awarded the IM title in 1978 and the GM title in 1984, so that's 4 years after this game she became a GM. She became the 6th Women's World Champion in 1978 by defeating Nona Gabjavashvili. Okay, so yeah, a Women's World Champion in 1978, two years prior to this game, so that's the background of this game. Kasparov was playing a Women's World Champion, and let's have a look at this game then. So this is played in Baku, 1980, 12th of April, I believe. So d4 from Kasparov, and Maya plays knight f6. We see a King's Indian defense being played, so Kasparov on the white side of a King's Indian defense. And here, the usual move, let's actually connect to live book and add a bits as usual, by the way. Let's go with Houdini, see if it kills the machine or not. Now the usual move is bishop e2, so that's the classical move in this position. Bishop e2. Here we get the third most popular. h3 is also very, very popular, second most popular, Makiganov system, but we get actually bishop e3. So this is very interesting. No, scrap that. No, we do get bishop e2. Now this is a certain move order confusion. E5 is played here. Now usually white castles, pardon me. We get bishop e3 now. We get bishop e3. Okay. Now with bishop e3, it's slightly provocative because h3 hasn't been played, and the usual move is knight g4 by far, and we get a kind of dance with bishop g5. This is what usually happens. Well, the knight's kind of kicked back, and that's quite common. But here knight g4 wasn't played. In fact, in this game, quite a rare move, considering there's all sorts of alternatives. ED, knight a6, knight bd7, quite rich territory after bishop e3. We see actually queen e7 being played in this game. Okay, and Kasparov actually closes up now d5, so this looks like a transposition to the so-called Petrosian system, named after Tigran Petrosian. This early d5, which seems not to care about the c5 square. Sometimes black can maneuver a knight to c5, but it's a very interesting system in its own right. Now we do actually see knight g4 in this position, bishop g5, f6, bishop h4, so it seems to be some very familiar ideas. h5 now, immediately it seems black is threatening, well, potentially things like potentially g5 and even h4 potentially, but you've got to factor in that this knight's going to be loose. So it's not that easy to carry this execution of the bishop out. But this looks like a precaution move, h3 to be played against that. Let's just ask a little question here actually. If h3 is not played, is it that bad? Let's just give a token move. I'm not sure this is winning a bishop or anything. If h4 here, well, we can play h3 actually. We can save the bishop with h3. That would be, actually this is okay for white according to engine. This is okay. This position is actually quite good for white if we had this. And remember, if black loses the light square bishop, you know, these squares can be potentially weak. So black's anyway, but white played h3 immediately, and the knight goes back. And yeah, the bishop's got an escape hatch ready. We see knight d2 now. And the center is closed in this position with c5. This might be quite a committal decision to close the center here. In one way, it's kind of potentially giving white a free hand on the king side. White hasn't actually committed his king yet to castling here. And it's interesting in this position. I've mentioned this idea a few times, this acceleration. Sometimes when you castle, there's a downside. The rook is using f1. So if you want to do a maneuver with the knight somewhere, castling actually slows that plan down. And here actually we could be witnessing a magnificent example of this accelerated use of the f1 square. The routine castling has a downside, it really does. White's king is fairly safe at the moment. And actually, one of the key things about this position is black has committed pawns to the dark squares, weakening the light squares. In particular, f5 would be nice. It would be nice to exchange off these bishops one day. We see this move knight f1, which puts the knight in contact with certain key light squares. We see knight f7. And now white plays g4, very aggressive on the light squares. What does black want to do here? This is the thing. Black took on g4, which seems a bit strange because you might think, isn't that just encouraging the exchange of the light square bishops? But what does black do as an alternative? Let's have a look here. Instead of hg as played, if g5, this is actually quite pleasant for white, this position here. If black's committing like this, this looks very pleasant. Let's just imagine this position. It looks fairly pleasant for white, with really f5 completely locked down by both of these pawns. Not entirely sure about black's counterplay in this position. If we had a scenario like this, white could probably increase positional advantage even with knight f5 to get the e4 square, or maybe even take with the g pawn to get a g file. So that wasn't entirely lucrative for black to consider playing g5 and h4 here. But this also doesn't look amazing, hg, because now we have this strategic bishop exchange. So the light squares are going to get a little bit weaker if we can exchange off that c8 bishop. It's often very important for black in the king's engine to maintain that light square bishop, but especially so with all these pawns committed on dark squares. The light squares just seem quite weak already, so it's like exacerbating that. g5 is played now. Kasparov doesn't retreat, he actually takes on c8, and black takes on c8. Is there an alternative? Well, if g takes, bishop e6, this is very pleasant for white. Very, very pleasant. That nasty pin, the knight's going to come to f5. So there isn't g takes h4 really. That bishop is taken. And now, what would everyone play here? What would a normal human chess player play? Well, what do you think Kasparov played here? So white to play. If I give you 20 seconds, because it's live stream, remember, this is not a video pre-recorded. So I'm going to give you 20 seconds to catch up. So white to play. What do you play here? Interesting. Do you just, what do you do? Just retreat the bishop or something else? What do you think about that? For a moment, it's a good excuse for me to pull some water. Yes, I'm off the Diet Coke. A few ideas are emerging. We've got a few votes. Queen g4, rook g1, bishop takes g5. Wow. Queen g4. Actually, let's have a look at a few of these. Some of these might not be entirely bad. Alright, let's have a look. Queen g4 might not be entirely bad. If black took, as an example, well, we take the rook, don't we? If knight shields the rook, then I guess we could do this. That's not entirely bad. Maybe the queen's going to be kicked later. It's not entirely clear either, though. Now another mention, like rook g1. This is interesting. Okay, so if g takes, we got some sacks maybe. This is interesting. We could take the rook. And this position is interesting, but it's not entirely clear. It is actually, pardon me, it is actually an advantage, a small advantage to white, but less than half pawn. No, the move Kasparov played is really quite a shock to the system and makes the game another kind of vivid experience to see this game, because once you've seen this game, you kind of never forget it, really, because I remember seeing this game years back. You'd never forget this game. So we've talked about the light squares and this accelerated knight maneuver. Plays just knight e3. This is like a full bishop sack just to get a knight to f5. Remember though, I think I have said once or twice, Kasparov's favourite place for a knight attacking the king side is a knight on f5, and he's getting a knight on f5 with tempo here. It's difficult to challenge that. Let's imagine black tries to challenge this and not take the bishop. Maybe this well, bishop g3, and then maybe h4 coming later. So it's not ideal to do that. Black takes up the gauntlet and plays g takes h4. So we have this knight with tempo. And what we have here in this position is, I can only describe this as what we see now over the next few moves. It's a continual build-up of pressure, relentless build-up of pressure on this G file. This knight is not going anywhere for a moment. First threat, Queen G4, threatening mate in 1. Black shields. And in fact, I think, well, what's the big deal about this? What's the big deal? Actually, the knight takes time out just to take this pawn. It's going to go back to f5. This is the funny thing about this. So the knight takes time out to get some inertia now, because we've got the h pawn involved as well. It was worth losing those two moves to get the h pawn involved. a6, as though black's going to play b5 with some counterplay. Well, we see h4 first, kicking that knight away. Rook g1, threatening now knight takes g7. Black has to defend that. Note how passive this knight is. It hasn't got any squares. It's blocked by its own pawn. It hasn't got g5. This is a very passive knight. And it's only one pawn Yeah. Basically, it's one pawn for black's extra bishop. In fact, after queen f8, by the way, Houdini likes this position for white. This is interesting in its own right, because I'm running quite a relatively new version of Houdini on an i7 here. And maybe before engines didn't really think much of this, but this engine thinks this is killing. This is already killing this position. It thinks it's killing. Just hold on a sec. Did black really go wrong already to be in this position? Hold on a sec. Maybe queen f8 was better there. If we rewind here. Yeah, probably around here, queen f8's mentioned. I don't know how much difference that would make. We might have to go back to move 18 after this. Alright, but here we get already, this is really liked by engines, this position now. This position here. It's actually really liked. Okay, so rook g1, queen f8. King e2 just quickly connects the rooks. King can stay in the center, and white just wants to build up more pressure on the g file. So we see this kind of tug of war of the pieces now, all the pieces, like a tug of war for defense and attack. But first, white sorts out b5 with a4. You might think, well, hold on, if a4 sorted out there, didn't black have b5 here? Not really. That could have been taken. It wasn't entirely ideal. This position is not ideal. Even with this check, it's not much counterplay, and these knights are pretty good. There's actually a threat of knight h6 and knight f7. It can't be allowed, that position. So okay, but just in case b5 is useful, it's shut down here. This really shuts down black's b5. Okay, so black's kind of paralyzed. This knight can't move without dropping g7, right? You know, if we play this knight takes g7 or queen g7. So we have b6. The tug of war is on. 3 pieces defending. At the moment, 3 pieces attacking. And you might feel, well, that bishop should surely unpin at some point. We have queen h5. So gearing up, actually, for a rook to be installed on g6. We have king h8, rook g6. It could have just gone to g3 as well, by the way. This is pretty good as well. Just go to g3. But the tug of war is still on. Getting more pressure on that g file. Rook d7. Rook ag1. And this is why the game's so vivid. It's like like an emphatic bishop sacrifice for that knight on f5, which took time out to take the h pawn for that h pawn to be potentially involved. And now we've got this huge pressure on the g file. How does this actually win? No. How would it actually win here? Okay, so we have rook ab7, queen g4, so that's 4 pieces pointing at the bishop, but hold on, the king here. But remember, we've got this little h pawn to add a 5th attacker. The h pawn is the loose cannon in this position. Although black's holding this tug of war, if this h pawn comes to h6, isn't that going to be like really dangerous? For the moment, white says to black, what are you doing? Rook g2. What is black doing with the pieces? Not much. Black just moves the rook back. Black's in a position here of helplessness, and Kasparov actually kind of sadistically improves his position just slightly, maybe getting a bit more towards the time control of move 40. He just plays king f1 at move 31. And now black's not doing anything, right? If black moves the king, let's move the king back. h5, it makes h5 even worse for h6. So black just is content at the moment. Well, not content. Black is helpless here. King g1, rook f7. So the question is, are we actually just using that h pawn to increase the pressure? Or is there something else? In fact, there is a spare piece for white, which is not in the attack. This knight is not in the attack yet. It has been helping stop b5, but it's not necessary to do that. Knight e2 is played. The knight can actually come like this to add another piece. It doesn't have to be the pawn. The knight can actually go to h5. But we see after queen c8, this is a very, very tempting plan, just to play knight g3. It's probably a winning move in this position. Kasparov actually chooses f4 actually, which gives white some more options. Notably also it means that the h-pawn is also even more viable because g5 has been taken away. If I ever wanted to block on g5, it's been taken away. Black dare not ever play e takes f4 because that really just gets the knight involved, and it might be coming to e6 and stuff. It's gigantic. No, so black is playing now b5. We have a takes, and now c takes, which ties up some black resources just to, I don't know, to try and get that pawn, get something going over there. But now the h-pawn, h5, finally the h-pawn has been prepared. h6 is a critical threat. It's just going to crash down this g-file for a mate on g8 if black does nothing. That's pretty simple to understand. You know, if takes as an example, this didn't happen, h6 and then just checkmate. Okay, this is quite a nice pressure on the g-file, and it's made worse now with this h6 coming. Knight f8 is played. Does that rule out h6? Kasparov actually played maybe an even stronger move than h6. He played queen h3. So knowing that this is a discovered check now if that's taken. Just for a moment, just imagine, is h6 winning as well? It's probably quite good for white actually. This position is good for white. I think Kasparov's move might actually be stronger. Even this is good for white, but Kasparov's move is even stronger. What he plays is actually queen h3. So he's saying to black, well, if you take, I'm going to take your rook at minimum, but also I'm threatening now h6, hg double check, and queen h8. So if black did nothing, let's imagine black did nothing, a token move. I think we just play h6, and we play h takes g double check. Okay, not queen h8 because of knight takes, but rook takes. This position is just, it's pretty much, it's all over actually. There's a queen takes c8 there in that example that I've given with rook d7. Okay, that's, so there's this attack on c8 in this position as well to factor in. But anyway, black has probably had enough by this point and plays knight takes g6, and this position is actually a forced mate in 5 technically. King g8. The forced mate in 5 is queen h7. Kasparov plays what's winning anyway, g takes, it's still forced mate. Basically king f8 was played here, and with that resigning, this is just hopeless. Rook takes g7 is all crashing through here. It's all murderous. Yeah. If let's say that this mate in 1, yeah, it's hopeless. It's horrible. It's past the 40 move time control. So anyway, this at the time when I first saw this game, I think it made a pretty vivid impression. I didn't remember the exact details on reviewing it, you know, pre-review for this tonight, but it's accentuated some ideas in the position. This review for me, the knight f1 to e3 is already an accelerated maneuver. The bishop sack makes it even more accelerated. Just this whole idea of getting the knight to f5. But opening up the g file, okay, then the knight took time out to take the h pawn, and the h pawn later is the unstoppable force in the position. This tug of war didn't last that long. I'm sure there are a lot of tug of wars that last a long time, but this one didn't really last that long at all. The h pawn was just the loose cannon, just ready to roll really after the knight took black's h pawn. So you have the g file trump card, the knight on f5, which is another trump card coming together, all that g file pressure, which although initially parried, it's the H pawn which is swinging the balance, crashing through black's position. And so, yeah, it just makes a great impression intuitively that sometimes maybe we can visualize the trump cards maybe without doing too much calculation. It's this imagination. I think Kasparov said about how do players get advantages in calculation. They need other areas like imagination, and he shows great imagination here. I'm sure this was not all calculated to the end, but it's just the imagination based on all the trump cards, and they came together. There was very little counterplay, let's face it, for black as well, after all this G-file pressure and this H-pawn. Very little counterplay. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this particular game. And I've got another two amazing games to show you. He just has a treasure trove. We need to just go into the treasure room and look at Kasparov's greatest games. It's a treasure room. This is just another treasure. It's just amazing. Remember, this is a women's world champion. Yeah, 1980. Okay, let's have a look at another game. The amusing thing about this, the opponent's name sounds a bit like my first name. My first name is spelled Tryfon. Now, Kasparov's opponent here is Trifon, and his surname's different to mine, Natsis. So it's apparently a Greek player. Trifon. I'm going to say it how I pronounce my name. Trifon Natsis is a Greek player, 56 years old. There's 4 games at chessgames.com. It doesn't actually say that much about him. So this is played in Malta, 1980. Malta, 1980. Okay. D4 from Kasparov. Knight F6. We have C4. Actually, this time we don't have the kings in. We have the Grunfeld defense. D5. C takes. Knight takes. E4. Yes, it's pretty standard Grunfeld moves to start off with. As standard as they go. This is the most popular move so far. And this move, Rook B1, very popular move in this position. Black castles, bishop e2, pretty bog standard. Knight c6. Until here, this is still bog standard, believe it or not. White plays in this position d5. It's the move that's played. Now black actually usually plays knight e5 here. Black doesn't go for this c3 pawn. A common continuation, there's over 700 games like this where white does protect that pawn now. Black's trying to strike at the centre, and we get a position like this which has been seen in many games. Very interesting position, thought to be about equal in play chess live book, in chess based live book. But in this game actually we get the slightly more greedy bishop takes c3 check. Trifon has been greedy here. My fellow namesake has been greedy taking this c3 pawn, and even I can see the immediate dangers of bishop d2 in this position. What is he thinking? What is he thinking? I'll tell you why. Because bishop takes d2, queen takes d2. If black doesn't play knight d4, black is dead. Black is finished if black does not play knight d4. Because I believe just queen h6 and knight g5. I'm going to just make it very... I mean, this looks really dangerous. Queen h4, knight g5, but it might not be as simple as that. There's f6, maybe queen h6, f6 at some point. Okay, but it's still dangerous. This position is still dangerous, but even more dangerous might be just h4 and just rip open the h file. maybe more subtle. Maybe this is damage enough. In fact, this line is light for white. There's damage enough on the light squares. It's good enough compensation already. But anyway, no, the move here, if black is going to play like this, black gives back the pawn, usually, in quite often, actually that's not even true. No, quite often black plays knight a5. This has been seen before. Black plays knight a5, but knight d4 has been seen a bit as well. Now knight d4 in the game continuation, giving back the pawn, gives white a trump card of centre pawns versus flank pawns. But before we get into that, let's have a quick peek at knight a5. This position is a little bit dangerous for black with h4, believe it or not. White could play like a caveman. If he plays like this, I'm sure there's just going to be something horrible like this. And then the crude ideas I mentioned actually all come to reality. So this position is really dangerous. If black has to play, well, black has the bishop takes. It looks pretty grim to defend this sort of position. White could just do this even and have a good position, if nothing else. So okay, knight d4 in this game, slightly rarer bird than knight a5. There's still 19 games in live book with knight d4. Okay, so knight takes d4. What we have here is white having an extra pawn kind of in the center, and black's got a 2-to-1 here, white's got the 2-to-1 there. Queen a5 check, and now the queens are coming off. Also, white's quick to the c file here. Look at that infiltration point. White can be quick to the c file in this position. We see rook d8. So immediately black's got in mind e6. The king gets out of the way, unpinning. b6. Quick to the c file. Rook bc1. e6 now. Now, if white took on e6, that's the end of like the pawn majority in the center. This might not be that convincing, this infiltration at all. So actually Kasparov is keen actually not to play that. He plays bishop c4. Probably the best move actually, bishop c4. Now, if ed, this position is tricky for black, because this infiltration is more painful with a bishop on d5. With bishop f7 in mind, it's more painful. Black dare not go passive here. That's just the end of the game. It's going to be the end of the game. Black dare not really do this because that's structural damage and losing a pawn. That's all pretty bad. So black decides lesser evil time. Black closes up with e5. Doesn't want a gigantic bishop on d5. But we've got a protected passed pawn now. This is really a protected passed pawn. Bishop b3, renewing the idea now of things like rook c7. But also white might want to play f4 to try and get these two pawns together going forward. Bishop d7. f4 is actually a dangerous move here to consider. Rook c7 is played though. That's another really strong move. Just authority over the c file. a5. d6. Yeah, white's dominating the position. He can actually consider like things like this, just dominating the c file and having a massive bishop again. b5. It's here that actually we do see the idea of f4, and funny enough, this might actually be one of the very strongest moves in the position. If we did go bishop d5 now, there might be a resource here for black. Rook a6. Remember, black's got the 2-to-1. It's not entirely beyond imagination for that to be dangerous for white. So anyway, f4 though is a different proposition. This pawn's pinned, right? There's no f6. So we see e takes f4, which means now there's more pawn mobility in the center, e5 and stuff. But also the f file now, this f7 point, actually more significantly than e5, is more significant. So rook f1 is the more significant idea to target f7 in some respects. Rook a6 is played, hitting d6. Now e5, but still we've got this f file to look forward to. a4, the bishop keeps its sights on f7. It just wants rook f1 basically. Why, it's looking forward to rook f1 here. a3, rook f1 now. This is achieving the dreams of white's pieces, just to put more pressure on f7. The central pawn mobility. Two trump cards coming together. Rook a4 check. We see king e3. Black has to give way here in some way. Look at this pressure on the position. It's difficult to defend this. Okay, let's try. Bishop e6 was tried. If bishop f5, this rook takes f7 is crushing. Doesn't, yeah, it doesn't matter about little tricks like this. Ooh. There is a little trick here, rook e4 check, trying to deflect the bishop. That doesn't, even that's good for white, but yeah, even this is just like g4. That's hopeless. Forget that. No. You can't allow that. And bishop e8. We have the rooks doubled here. This is like horrendous. Forget that with the two passed pawns. No. Okay, so bishop e6, trying to stay in the game. That's taken, and now the rooks still come together. Rook f7. They might not immediately be mating because black's clinging on for dear life here, but there is another problem in this position of the check. The first problem is king f8 is actually a mate in 6 off the check, and here it's a mate in 5, believe it or not, with rook f3, which means actually rook e7 checkmate is threatened. So that's hopeless for black. He'll have to give up a rook just to stave off checkmate. So the king can't go that way, so it goes back in the box on h8, back over there. But in this position now, these other two trump cards, can you see just white simply actually can just make use of the central pawn trump cards with this next move, which actually encourages black to resign. So simple and a strong move to finish off the game. Can you guess it? White to play here. What would you play with white? Actually, we can just play rook e7. We can just play rook e7 because remember, if we're getting two mobile connected pass pawns, it's pretty good. There's no way black can defend this. And there's also actually not just this threat. There's also d7 anyway for rook e8. Let's give black a move. We can either play d7 or rook takes. I mean, this is crushing, but this is even more crushing. d7, just with rook e8 check. Or rook c8 even. That's even more crushing. Yeah, it's all over here. This pass pawn here is enough. We don't even need the fellow pass pawn. Okay, so yeah, that was the end of that one. Now, okay, so the impressions, you can just think about these games in terms of trump cards actually after the opening. The trump card white got after the opening after the way black played it with bishop takes c3. It seemed to be just the centre pawns versus the flank pawns, and the more active rooks ready to infiltrate on the c file. So the rooks did infiltrate on the c file, but later actually the king around on e3 did support f4. The king was also helping, opening up another trump card, the f file. So white's bishop was beautifully placed already on the diagonal for f7. It was just too much pressure. Black conceded so much. He had to do bishop e6, fracturing pawns. Just the rooks connected on the 7th rank. White had that major pass pawn on d6, let alone e5. It was all crashing through after that. But I think, yeah, both of these games we can remember with trump cards. Forget about specific moves. The outline, the story of the game is quite memorable again from what happened after the opening. To me, I hope it is to you. It's quite memorable. Just think about it as these are like major trump cards Kasparov's getting after the opening. Okay, so the third game I'd like to show you tonight is against Ulf Andersson. Now this is played in the Tilburg tournament of 1981. Now Ulf Andersson is very well known. A quick bio, by the way, from chessgames.com. He's 65 years old, from Sweden. He was Swedish champion in 1969, awarded the IM title in 1970, the GM title in 1972. During 1972 to 82 period, he was in the world's top 10. Had first prizes at Belgrade 1977, Buenos Aires 1978, Hastings 78 to 79, Phillips Madrid 1980, 1982, Turin 1982, Weekendsley 1983, and a load of other tournaments actually. Rome 95, 85, 86. He drew a 6-game match with Mikhail Tal in 1983. He played top board in the second USSR versus Rest of the World match in 1984, and he led the Swedish Olympiad team during the 1970s and 80s. That's quite topical because we've got the Chess Olympics at the moment. He also played, this is a bit of trivia while we're here, he broke the world record for playing a simul with 310 opponents. That was in 1996. 310. And he scored plus 268. He lost only 2 and he drew 40, getting a 92.9% record, which stood until Andrew Martin broke it in 2004. And he also devoted himself to correspondence chess. Okay, so becoming a grandmaster of correspondence chess in 1996. But anyway, okay, so that's little intro. D4 from Kasparov. So Ulf Andersson played knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3. We have Queen's Indian territory with a3. Quite often in this position g3 is played. By far the most common move is g3 here. Kasparov's little pet move a3 is played. So I had this as a little pet. Bishop b7, knight c3. Quite often d5 is played here. For example, taking like this. This has been seen quite a bit, this position. But here we actually get the move knight e4, moving a piece twice. You might think, ooh, that's a bit of a worry, moving the knight twice. In fact, okay, white takes that and hits the bishop, which now goes to g6. This is all a bit strange, you might think. This position here, isn't it a little bit strange? Because didn't the bishop just want to be on this diagonal? Didn't it? Why is it on g6? Let's have a quick look at this. If it went back to b7, that would be fine actually as well. Just go back to b7, that would be fine. There's nothing terribly wrong with this, it seems. This is fine. Anyway, the bishop wanted to go to g6 here in this game. we see g3. So this bishop naturally wants to go on that diagonal. Knight c6, hitting the pawn. Now, knight f3 wasn't used. In fact, Kasparov, probably because bishop e4 is annoying, Kasparov actually used the pawn here. Any bishop there's no bishop e4. It's just ruling out bishop e4. Doesn't want to move this knight. Okay, so a6 is played. Maybe. Okay, so a6 is an interesting move. Kasparov plays b4. So he's got two options of the fianchettos, b2 and g2. a6 is now, the idea is revealed. b5 is the big idea. Okay, trying to lure white into weakening a little bit the light squares. If c5, I think black can try and just maybe even play this actually. Black should be okay. Alright, but Kasparov, he took on b5 and now plays bishop b2. The point is here, if bishop takes b5, knight takes b4 because we've got that a file, and this position is actually, apparently it's okay for black. It's fine for black. It should be fine, this sort of position. More than fine. Black might even be better. Yeah, you don't want to give black all that counterplay taking on b5 there. So no, leave that pawn on b5. We see instead bishop b2, just addressing black's threat of bishop takes or knight takes. So bishop b2 protects the rook, and also it means that this bishop might actually be good one day on the diagonal if d5 is ever played. In fact, white is now threatening bishop takes b5, so that's protected. h4 now, this threat is now against this bishop to try and trap that bishop, potentially rather naughtily, like with e4 there. So if black played a routine move here, he didn't. He has to give way for the bishop. That would be like winning the bishop. Okay, so black gives the bishop an escape square. Things get quite interesting now. We see this move d5 just opening up the bishop at the cost of a pawn, inhibiting black's natural development. Bishop can't move without dropping g7. That would be unfortunate here. There's not much to say about this position. Just you can't do that. So black takes on d5 for the moment. Bishop g2. That's supported. White castles now. So black's been delayed in development, and he has some strange looking pieces like this knight on a7. And in fact here, it's difficult for black to easily develop. He plays actually f6. Okay, so what's the compensation for the pawn? Well, you might simply think, well, with Kingston in the centre, what about e4? E4 is probably a really good move as well as what was played. Rook e1 just seems to prepare e4 basically. Bishop e7 is played. After this though, now we get a forcing move, queen g4. King f7, another forcing move. I think Kasparov had a term for it, hard pressing his opponent. When you play a series of forcing moves all the time, it's like he called it hard pressing in one of his books. Okay, so another forcing move. Okay, bishop a7. What is he getting? He's getting some positional trump cards. He's getting great grip on the light squares though. It's not forcing moves for the sake of it. He's getting some extra little trump cards here. e4, he's trying to rip open the position now. These bishops, beautiful crossfire of the bishops here. D takes. We have bishop takes e4, threatening immediately. Well, bishop takes h7 is on the cards now. For surely queen g6 after, if black doesn't do anything. So bishop takes e4 is played. Knight takes e4. We see knight c8. The knight's trying to get back in the game. The rooks join forces together. It looks very pretty, but is white actually threatening anything? It's here now. Well, white is threatening the d7 pawn. That's protected. If this pawn actually moves, I'm not sure this is such a good idea. But anyway, black didn't do that. Black played rook a7, but we get a fascinating move in this position. Actually, rather fascinating. In the extreme, I wonder if you can guess it. White to play. This is really quite fascinating. White to play. Fascinating move. Can you see what white plays here? I think this requires some imagination as well as calculation. $200 points. Can you guess what white plays here? Anyone? Actually, there's probably some very strong. It's a very strong position for white in any case. Positionally, white can, if white just wanted to play purely positionally, he could just get rid of this dark square bishop and try and just make sure these dark squares are even weaker. This engine's positional method is just bishop d4 here with tempo, and I think we just play bishop c5, and this is really strong here. We've not only positionally taking out the bishop, we've got things like knight takes f6. This position would seem a wipeout position. This kind of thing is a wipeout. Threatening mates there. This is a total wipeout. That's the engine's way of looking at the position, which is pretty clean, clinical, and everything. But Kasparov played knight takes f6, which is another great move. But yeah, I mean, in this position, yeah, this is another way with the check. Bishop d4. That's pretty strong as well on the rook. But okay, knight takes f6 is a brilliant looking move as well. What is this about? Okay, the first point here is bishop takes f6, check, and we get that rook e8 mechanism going. We don't play rook e8 here, we play bishop takes f6. Okay, if queen takes, we've got the mate. With queen okay, that's mating, right? But if g takes, can you see what white plays here, which I think is quite amusing, actually. White to play here, tactical test. There's a crushing blow in this position, which is quite amusing. So this didn't even happen in the game, right? What can white do here, which is totally murderous? Crushing. Yeah, okay, I think you'll start to guess rook e6. The two rooks are really quite good friends here, aren't they? This is one's pinning that one for this one to go in. With rook f6 to follow, it's just murderous. It's just gonna, like, black's gonna be forced to give up his queen, otherwise he gets like mated, yeah. And after that, it's not looking too clever here or here, bringing the rook in for the kill. It's not good after that. So actually, this whole thing on bishop takes f6 isn't entirely appetizing. So just to recap, the check and bishop f6 is winning. So actually g takes f6 is played. Now we have queen g6, king f8. Bishop c1 now, threatening bishop takes h6. Actually, it doesn't just threaten bishop takes h6, it threatens to create a dangerous passed h pawn, to be more precise or more detailed about it. There's a potential h pawn trump card now after bishop c1. So white has been content to sack a piece to fracture black's pawns to get this position with this fracture to get h6. You know, he's fractured and isolated both these pawns, and he's targeting in particular h6, which is the weaker of the two. It's only this rook holding h6. So this is going next, basically, from the original pawn chain. Potentially d5 is played. Okay, now it might seem as though, hang on, just play bishop h6, right? That's possible, but maybe even stronger is what was played, just building up a bit more. Rook d4 stops black in his tracks there, and also rook g4 to threaten things like queen g7. So holding this threat for a moment, and also saying I'm going to play rook g4 for queen g7, which is another great feature of this position. That this g file is weaker now that these pawns have been split apart. Rook g4 is really dangerous. We see knight d6. Isn't this knight going to help? Not really. Rook g4 threatening a mate in 2. Actually, bishop takes now is a threat of mate in 2 because of queen g8 checkmate there. Just to show that if knight e4, this is checkmate there. So that's the threat now. Knight f7 holding h6. Just in time. It has the knight being a hero. Has it? Not quite. Bishop takes h6 is played. Now if rook takes, then we've got queen g8 checkmate, and if knight takes, we've got check, and taking here, and taking here is sufficient. We're the exchange up, and we've still got this passed pawn. It's just winning. But in the game, we get king e8 actually. As I mentioned, we've got a passed pawn here. We see just bishop g7. Kasparov actually doesn't care about the king even now. Black resigns after this, but we can see that this pawn is actually mega dangerous now. This rook's threatened because that knight's pinned. Now, black resigned. If he plays rook g8, h6 is just really difficult for black to do anything about this. This pawn's like queening. This pawn's queening. We, just take here. I'm getting material about immediate. It's just horrible. Take here. It's just horrible. g8. We can just play g8 or queen f7. Yeah, no. After bishop g7, the pawn. What does the rook do? I mean, what does the rook do here? Here, h6. Yeah, it's defenseless. Black's just in such a defensive posture here. Yeah, just h7. It's all going to collapse. It's all going to collapse. No good. e7. Can't even take here because of e7. So actually, after bishop g7, yeah, black resigned. 30-move game. Black resigned. So it's in quite a lot of people's games collections, actually, this one at Chess Games Gone. Quite a celebrated game. Yes, interesting comments about it. It's very dynamic play. Okay, the standout move is the sacrifice on f6. What did that do again? It fractured black's pawns, which meant h6 was dropping. What did that mean? It meant white had this dangerous h pawn. Didn't even need to find a false checkmate. So sack a piece to create structural damage, take apart the weakest isolated pawn, create your own massive pass pawn, whilst the king, although it's not checkmated, is just getting in the way. It's just incredible dynamic play, which shows actually Kasparov is not clear cut about the king attack. There's also these other emerging side effects, trump cards. It doesn't even need to deliver checkmate. It's this h pawn which is winning here in the end. Sometimes people say, you know, play the sack and think about it later. Maybe, you know, the wisdom of that might be to do with this sort of stuff, that, you know, you don't need to force a checkmate. Sometimes other good stuff arrives on the scene here, but this h pawn is a killer in this position. So I think these are all pretty vivid games, these three. I hope you remember them for their themes and the trump cards and stuff. And it's not always about having to checkmate, as we can see from these examples. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. Comments, questions, likes, appreciated, and we'll carry on next week with another three from the treasure trove of Kasparov's games. Okay, thanks very much.